So we save that, and now we have our actions. And this action is a lot more complicated than the set search field. We have right away when we call this action, a dispatch that requests robots pending. And then we fetch the users, we receive the users, and then we either have a success with the payload of the users or an error with the payload of error. Finally, we go into the reducers. And in the reducer, we know that we want to import from the constants the same actions that we had. So let's just go to constants, or let's go to actions and copy exactly what we have here as well, because we're going to need all those constants. And now down here, we're going to create a new reducer, because instead of combining all these reducers, we want to make them each specific to their use case. This reducer worries about search robot. The new reducer is going to worry about the request robots. And once again, with the same syntax, we have state that's going to equal the initial state, and then the action that is going to have default empty object. And within here, an object, or within here, we'll have once again a switch statement that listens to action.type. And this action.type is going to have three possible states. One is that case is request robots pending, in which case we return object.assign, again, an empty object, the state, and then finally, we're going to create a new state called isPending. And this isPending is going to be set to true, because the request robots is pending currently. All right. The next thing we're going to do, again, we're going to have a case for this time the success, and this is going to return object.assign, an empty object, a state, and this new property, robots, that is action.payload. And also, we want to change the state isPending to now be false, because we've gotten the response from the promise. And then the third case is when there's an error. And in that case, we're going to return object.assign state, and we'll just have an error state that we'll create that has the action.payload. And once again, we're going to want to change the isPending to be equal to false, and close the object. And remember, always with a reducer, we want to have the very end always return the state if it doesn't match any of the criteria. So again, return state. Awesome. Now you might be thinking to yourself, initial state, we have this, but request robots doesn't care about search field. And in this case, we want to create two different initial states, one for the search robots and one for the request robots. So let's rename this to initial state search and create a new state, initial state robots, that now has these three states that we mentioned here. That is pending of false to start off with, a robots array that is currently empty, and an error string that is also empty. So let's save that. And let's see some errors that we get here. And we just have a little bit of a syntax error because we don't need this curly bracket. There you go. And again, we want to change the initial state robots in the function to this one. We save and everything looks good. Let me make this a little bit smaller. Now we have a problem. We have two reducers now. And if we go to index.js, we see that in the create store function, we're just using the search robots reducer. So let's import now the other reducer that we have, which is request robots, and now add this into the store as well. But how do we do that? Well, we have a function that, again, comes with Redux that's called combine reducers. And this combine reducers, pretty self-explanatory, combines all the reducers into a root reducer. So let's do that. I'm going to say const root reducer is going to equal the combine reducer, and this is going to accept in an object form all the reducers. In my case, it's the search robots and request robots. And now this root reducer can be used in the store to include both reducers. Let's save. All right, we're almost there. Now, because we just used combine reducers, it's something that we've mentioned before. And that is, if I go into app.js and scroll all the way up to map state to props, our state now no longer has search field as part of its property. Instead, it's going to have two properties, search robots and request robots, which each have their own properties. So now we have to update the search robots like this, which has the property of search field. So this is what you're most likely going to see when you're working in Redux in map state to props. Perfect. Now, the final piece of the puzzle, Redux Thunk. How does this work? Well, Redux Thunk is a middleware that waits and sees if any actions return a function instead of an object. What does that mean? If we go to actions, we see that this is returning an object. But right here, we're not returning an object, are we? As a matter of fact, we're not really returning anything right now. Thunk middleware is waiting for a function. And if ever an action that goes through it, remember, a middleware is just a tunnel that actions go through, and it notices a function, it's going to act upon it. So let's do that first, and I'll explain in details how it works. We first need to go to app.js, and within here, we want to update a few things. First, we want to update the state to now also include the robots, to have state.request robots.robots. Again, this is the state from the reducer. There's also the is pending state, again, through the request robots.is pending. And then finally, the error state from, once again, state request robots error. The second part, and the most important part, is the request robot action. Again, something that replaces this component did mount request. The way we can do that is within here, add another property that we're going to pass on, and we can name it whatever we want. We'll say on request robots. And this is going to be a function. And this function, remember, we don't want to necessarily just dispatch. We want to return a function from it. In our case, it's the request robots reducer. And this request robots reducer or action has the dispatch method. All right, I know that's a lot, so let's just go through this one more time. Right now, we need the request robots action. And this request robots action needs a dispatch method to actually dispatch these actions. So in app.js, we first need to import our action, which is request robots from the actions file. And this request robots needs to have the dispatch method. This is the same as doing this. And now, this dispatch is going to work as long as we use Redux Thunk, because it's going to catch the fact that this is going to return a function. So if we go back to our actions, we can now do this. All right, what just happened? Well, we've created a higher order function, a function that returns a function. And I know this can get a little bit confusing, but a thunk, because now request robots is going to return, again, because of error functions, this is going to imply that it's returning this. It's going to provide the dispatch function to this second layer function so that we can use it here. Again, this is something that you just have to get used to, but in the end, if we save this, let's see if it works. Now, I know it's the first time around, so we've probably messed something up, but let's check it out. I refresh, and everything works. We're not getting any errors, but remember, we actually need to connect it to our app. If we go back, we can now go to app.js, and we have all these props that we can use now. So the component did mount no longer needs to have the fetch call. All it needs is this.props dot and the action that we have on request robots. On request robots. Perfect. And we also don't need the constructor anymore, do we? Because there's no more states. These robots are now going to be returned as part of the props from on request robots. So again, we're going to change this .state to robots. And we can also get is pending to check if is pending is true, to render. If this is true, then we want to render loading. If not, we want to just render our RoboFriends. So those are coming from our props. And now we only have component did mount in our app. Let's save and go back to our app. All right, look at that. That doesn't happen very often, but I somehow managed to code without making any errors. Again, that's a rarity. Enjoy this moment. I'm definitely enjoying it. We see over here that we have request robots pending being fired, and then success being fired again. Let's refresh quickly. All right, what happens if the request fails? Let's go back here and go to our action.js, and let's just type something wrong here. We'll say like that, save it, go back, and there you go. We have request robots failed. Very cool. Let's fix that and save. All right, we have our app that does the exact same thing as before. Nothing too crazy, just filtering our robots. But the only difference is that we have this amazing logging ability, and it's using Redux. Very cool. I want to go over this one more time. And this is because it is a bit of a sticking point for most people. Remember this request robots, how it has this two functions? The request robot, right now, Redux out of the box, wouldn't understand this because we're not returning an object as it expects for an action. We're returning a function. And this function isn't going to mean anything to it. By adding Redux Thunk middleware, we're now listening to actions. And anytime the request robot's action gets triggered, it's going to return a function and trigger Redux Thunk. And Redux Thunk is going to say, oh, this is a function. I'm going to give you, here's the dispatch so you can actually call some actions. And we can finally run our actions like this. So if we go back to our diagram, we've created a system where the actions are being triggered. They go through any middleware. If it's a search term change, it's just going to go straight to the reducer, run through a nice function, update the store, and make changes to our view. If we request robots, it's going to notice that it's a function. It's going to go into the middleware, and Redux Thunk is going to say, all right, first just dispatch pending to the reducer, and I'll let you know when I'm done with the promise, and I'll let you know if I got any robots. And when it returns, it's going to dispatch the success, go through the reducer, update the store, and make changes. Whew, that was a lot. But if you got this far and you understand it, you've pretty much gotten Redux. That's it. That's the whole Redux library. It's very, very simple. And once you start using it a couple of times and you get comfortable with it, it's really, really beautiful the way everything works. But for now, let's all take a break. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. All right, so we got Redux working nicely with our app. We've just learned an awesome library. I hope everybody's feeling good. Now, I do want to add a few things. Obviously, this is a simple example, but the fundamentals are there. Using these principles, you can go off and build larger and larger applications. But as I've been writing this, you may have noticed a few things. One, well, let's look over here at our folder structure. We can imagine as our app grows that it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is actually something I'm going to demonstrate to you later on in the course when we work on the SmartBrain app, where we start loading our app.js with a ton of functions. And we're not using Redux for it. So this file gets longer and longer with new methods and new methods and new methods. Now, having one container component, that is having one connected component, a component that knows that the Redux store exists and listens to props and dispatch actions from it. Well, having just one is not really realistic. Most likely, you're going to have multiple containers. But because of the way Redux works, that's fairly easy to do. We can just use connect and pick and choose which components we want to connect to the Redux store. And if we want two containers to speak to each other, well, very simple. We just connect them. And because the store is up above everything else, we're able to get that state information. So it makes communication very, very easy. So we obviously want to have containers like this and simple presentational components that are just pure functions that just receive props and render. However, as we grow more and more components and more containers, it starts to make sense to not have just one constants file, one actions file, and one reducers file. You can imagine these getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you'll see projects that have a actions folder, a constants folder, and a reducers folder. But I personally like the component way of doing things. That is, group everything according to the component. For example, create an app.js, or let's say there's a smart search field component. We're going to create a folder called search field, and that search field folder is going to have all the DOM presentational components that it needs. It's going to have all the actions that it needs in action.js. It's going to have all the reducer that it needs, and it's also going to have all the constant that it needs. So each folder is going to represent a component, a chunk of our website, and it's all coupled together in one little folder. So if we ever want to share code, it's going to be fairly easy to do. It's also really nice to think about it that way, instead of having these massive general folder names. And that's what you'll see with most big projects. This idea of components that have their own folders, these containers that again have their own folders as well as reducers and actions. And this way you can read through the folder structure and decide where you want to go to fix a bug or create a new feature. You also want to avoid repeating code as much. For example, in most applications, we're going to have a lot of fetch call. So wouldn't it be great if we had an API folder here that does the fetch call? Maybe we'll call it API get API, and all we need to do is pass a function, and that function is going to pass that URL into the fetch function, and it's also going to do this JSON for us. So it's just going to return the data. So we stop repeating all this fetch.then, .catch. So thinking in terms of organizing your folders to something that makes sense, something that can scale. And if somebody comes onto the project, it makes it easy for them to follow and read is a good way of doing things. All right. That's enough for now. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Welcome back. I wanted to take one video to just go over a thing that might trip up a lot of people when they're first starting off with React. Remember, React is only a view layer library. Thus, React only enables you to build component-driven user interfaces. And it has some solutions such as its own local state management and a simple way to handle events to make interactions on our website happen. But at the end of the day, it's a simple library that helps with the view. Once you start building large-scale applications, you need to add on top of React. The power of React comes from this ability to tack on new features, new libraries to it, in order to customize it to your own liking, to your own app. So as applications grow, or you start working for a large company, you'll see them use some other tools on top of React. And I wanted to go over quickly some of the ones that are the most common common to see out there. We first have React Router, and that is for routing. So changing pages and changing routes in our URL. It's pretty much the standard when it comes to any React and Redux project. So highly, highly recommended. Very easy to use, very easy to learn as well. It'll take you a day and you can pick it up fairly easily. You also have things like utility libraries. And these are libraries that add to the current JavaScript tools that you get out of the box. So think of it as added functions to JavaScript. The most popular are Lambda, if you want to really keep the functional programming ideology, a really, really good library. And there's also the most popular Lodash, which again gives you extra tools that you can use with JavaScript. You also want to think about styling with React. And again, there's a number of tools that people use for styling. There's Glamorous, which I really, really like. There's styled components, which again is very nice and quite similar to Glamorous. And then there's things like CSS modules. I'd say these three are probably the best to use if you want to tack on a smarter way to deal with styles in React. And again, these are quite easy to pick up. You can spend a day on them and get the hang of it. Next, we have something called Gatsby.js. And this is really, really good for static websites in React. So that is simple text-based websites. Actually, if you go to the React documentation, their documentation is actually served with Gatsby.js because, well, they're just simple text-based pages that works really, really well. Then there's also Next.js, extremely popular for server-side rendered apps. And that's something that we'll talk about when we get to the server-side section. And we'll actually build a simple Next.js app. But very popular, and I highly recommend it if you're building anything server-side. Next, probably what React is known for, and I just picked two options here, but there's so many out there. React is really, really good because we're able to build reusable components. So if I build a really cool calendar component, I can put it online and other people can just grab that component and use it in their projects as well. So some of the bigger ones are material UI components that, again, you can just use. And there's also the semantic UI library that has a ton of React components that you can use. Again, another awesome reason to use React is these components that people share, and you can just add on to your website. And then finally, there's tools that make Redux better, more efficient. You have things like reselect that you'll see in most Redux projects that help with something called selectors and improve the performance of your apps. You also have things like Redux Saga, which handles asynchronous actions in Redux. So think of it as Redux Thunk, but supercharged. So as things get more and more complex, you have more and more asynchronous actions, you might want to start looking at things such as Redux Saga. It is a little bit complicated to learn at first, and there's people that love it and hate it, but definitely something that tries to solve the problem of what do we do when we start getting bigger and bigger and bigger apps. And then you also have something like Immutable.js that you can use as a library to make sure that your state remains immutable and enforce that among your developer teams. Now, I don't expect you to know every single one of these and use every single one of these in your projects. As a matter of fact, I want you to caution against them. And every time you add something, ask yourself, do I really need it? What's the benefit that I'm getting out of this? Because adding any library to our project adds extra weight, adds extra JavaScript that we need to deliver to the client. So make sure if you're adding any of these things that you have a justifiable reason that actually improves the value of your product. And it also helps with the development. So when you think of value, don't just think customers and users. Also think of developer teams and people you work with. Are they going to benefit if you add Immutable.js to your code base? Or is the extra learning curve and the frustration that developers might have by using Immutable worth the safeguards that it might add to your project? But anyway, I wanted to emphasize that as a senior developer, always consider pros and cons, whether you need something, and if you do need something, really analyze what is the best tool for the job. I feel like a broken record because I've said this numerous times, but it is a really important concept. So don't just add Immutable.js because you read it in a blog post and everybody's raving about it. Each project is different, so you need to be able to make those decisions for yourself, for your project, for your developer team. All right, enough talking for me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Hello and welcome to the section for Windows users. You might ask yourself, wait, hold on a sec, who is this guy? This is not Andre. Did I pick the wrong course? Don't worry, you are on the right course. Let me introduce myself. I'm Wolfgang. You might know me already from the Q&A or from Discord. I worked as full stack developer in 2010. Since 2011 I work as paramedic. I also enrolled in this course on February 2018 and finished it on April 2018. Andre gave me back my passion again about full stack development. I made all projects work on my computer and helped also a few students to make it also work for them. Now I got this great opportunity to show you how you can make all the tools that you need throughout this course work on your Windows system. Enough about me. Let us dive into the first lecture where we talk about the installation of Git on Windows. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. Let's kick things off by installing Git for Windows. Windows doesn't ship with Git out of the box, so we have to install it ourselves manually. Open your browser. Search for Git for Windows and go to the official Git for Windows website. There you can click download. Depending on your internet connection, this might take a while. Because of that, I already downloaded it in advance. Navigate to your downloads directory and execute the installer. It will ask you for further permissions. Click yes. Now let's proceed. Click next. Now we will see a few default settings which are already checked for you. The Windows Explorer integration makes sure if you right-click in your Explorer and show more options, then you can execute the Git bash right away. It will open up in the current directory where you're currently located. Git LFS makes sure if you have really large files in your Git repository that you commit them as well. Associated Git configuration files with the default text editor means you can open those files directly in the defined text editor. Associated SH files. Usually you can't execute SH files on your Windows operating system. But because we get Git bash for free, we have the opportunity to also execute those files. Hit next. Now you can set your default text editor, which you can use to edit your commit messages or other messages which are related to Git. In my case, I use Visual Studio Code, so therefore Visual Studio Code is predefined. But you can also change it to Sublime Text, because Andre uses Sublime Text throughout the course, and if you use it as well, then choose Sublime Text. There are a few other things as well. Choose that one which fits best for you. In my case, I go with Visual Studio Code. This configuration means you can decide which name your default branch should have. Usually we had master in the past, but this changed, and now I choose override and choose main as my default name for my default branch. Now you can choose where Git should be available. I would recommend to use the Git from the command line and also from third-party software, because I myself switch often back and forth between PowerShell, CMD and Git Bash. I need this setting. I would recommend it because you might do it in the future as well, so you are set up properly. Hit next. Use the bundled OpenSSH which ships with Git. Also the OpenSSL library is important. Now the line endings. Windows uses different line endings than Unix or Mac. In this case, you want to make sure the line endings get converted the right way. So go with checkout Windows style and commit Unix style line endings. Next. We use the default engine, which makes sure everything gets displayed properly in our terminal. We also want the fast forward or the merge. The Git Credential Manager core is useful if you are trying to push things and you have stored your credentials in this Git Credential Manager. You also want to enable the file system caching because it can speed up things. No experimental things here. And let's install it. This might take a while, so let me fast forward for you that you don't have to wait. Alright, we are finished now. Make sure you uncheck the few release notes, except if you are interested in what's in there, and hit finish. Now let's check if everything worked as expected. Open your terminal. It is important that you open a new terminal, because otherwise environmental path variable wouldn't be refreshed automatically. In my case, I didn't have one open, so I just open a new one. Let me increase the size. And now, to make sure that everything is installed properly, type git -- version. Alright, Git is installed properly. One thing which I want to mention is, a few students encountered in the past an issue. They weren't able to push right away. They got the message that they have to define their Git username and their email with which they want to commit any changes. In order to do so, I would recommend to configure those credentials right away. You can do so by simply executing the commands git config -- global user.name and then type your name. In my case, it's Wolfgang. The other thing which you have to configure is the email. With git config -- global user.email and then type your email. In my case, my GitHub email is raptors@protonmail.com. Alright, now everything is set up and you can start using Git on Windows. In order for us to be able to use React.js, we have to install Node.js in advance. Open your browser. Search for Node.js. Go to the official Node.js website and there pick the LTS version. LTS means long-term support. Want to have more information? Click on this link. But all it means is it ships with the most stable features. Depending on your internet connection, this might take a while. Therefore, I already downloaded it in advance. Go to your downloads folder. There you will find the Node installer. Just execute it. Now we are in the installation wizard. Hit next. Accept the license agreement and hit next. Use the default folder which it mentions to you. Leave everything as it is here. And leave this one unchecked. You don't want to have Chocolatey right away. If you want to have it, you can install it afterwards as well. Hit Next. And then Install. Now it will ask you for more permissions. Just hit Yes. Now let me fast forward for you so that you don't have to wait. Alright, it got installed successfully. Just hit Finish. Now it's time to verify if Node.js got installed successfully. Just open your terminal. Let me zoom in so that you can see the results better. To verify if Node.js got installed successfully, just type in node-v. Alright, Node version 16.13.0 in this case. You might have a higher version number in your case. With Node.js there is also NPM which got installed, so let's verify if that worked as well. To verify it, just type npm-v. Alright, we have NPM version 7.20.2. So everything worked. Now we can start with React.js. For our final SmartBrain project, we will need PostgreSQL. Open your browser. Search for PostgreSQL download. Move over to the official PostgreSQL website. There, hit on Windows. As you can see, you can't see the latest version here available. So you want to download the installer by clicking on this link. There, pick the latest version. In my case, it is version 14. Hit download. Depending on your internet connection, this might take a while. Therefore, I already downloaded it in advance. Let's go to my downloads directory. Execute the Postgres installer. It will ask you for further permissions. Hit Yes. Now we can start the installation process with Postgres. Here, just hit Next. Leave the defaults as they are right here. Hit Next. Also here, you want to install everything which ships with the Postgres installer. Hit Next. Here, hit Next as well. Now you have to choose a password. What you have to keep in mind is, this is also the password which you need for the Connect object, which we use in our SmartBrain project. In my case, I just use the password test. Hit Next. Leave the port as it is. Hit Next. Here you can choose the default local for your database. I will recommend to also choose here just the default local. Hit Next. Now we can start with the installation process. Hit Next once again. Let me fast forward for you so that you don't have to wait. Alright, PostgreSQL got installed successfully. Just unstack the stack builder here, we don't need it right now, and hit Finish. Okay, so let's verify if Postgres got installed successfully. Open your terminal. In here, just type psql and hit Enter. Oh no, psql got not found. So let's double check if it is available in our environmental variables. To do so, hit the Windows key and type environmental variables. Here we can edit them. Just hit this and click on environment variables. There you have a section which is called Path. Edit this one. Scroll all the way down and there should be PostgreSQL, but it isn't in there. So how to fix it? All you have to do is go out here, open your Explorer. Postgres got installed under C, Program Files, x86. And here we search for Postgres SQL. It is not in Program Files x86. It got saved into Program Files. There we look for Postgres SQL. Here it is. Move to version 14. And there you have the bin directory. This is the one where the PSQL lives in. Once you enter this directory, just click in the address bar and copy the entire path. Exit out of the Explorer and search for the environmental variables again. There we move to environmental variables and search for the path. Click Edit. And then now you can just add a new one by hitting a new and paste in what we have copied before. Hit Enter. And now you can hit OK, OK here, and OK here. So let's try again if we have PSQL available in our terminal. So let me zoom in. And now let's type PSQL, hit Enter. And now, hold on a sec, I don't have a password, I guess. Just try test, because this is the one which I've chosen. Oh no, I can't log in. Yes, you know, your Windows user doesn't get any password for using Postgres. To overcome this issue, you just have to use an additional flag. So in this case, it is PSQL minus uppercase U and then type Postgres. Hit Enter. Now it will ask for the user Postgres. I have chosen test, so I type in test again. Alright, I'm in Postgres right now and I could query databases in my Postgres. As you have seen, the password doesn't get shown, neither with stars or any other kind of feedback. This is a common thing in the terminal area. You don't get a feedback for security reasons, but it will pick what you ever enter. So, this was enough for this lecture. In the next lecture, I will show you how to create a database in the command line and how to use pgadmin to navigate around your created databases. I see you in that one. Bye bye. Now it's time to start using Postgres. Let's start by using Postgres in the terminal. Let me make that bigger so that we can see more. And of course, full screen. Postgres ships with a few command line helpers. In this case, I use the create db command line helper, which will create a new database. We also have to use here the -u flag and the user Postgres, because this is the only one which has a password right now. Afterwards, we write the name of the database. Hit Enter. Now it will ask for the password. In my case, it is test. Alright, looks like it got created successfully. Let's verify that. We enter into the Postgres mode as user Postgres again. And we want to have the database test, which we created before. Type in the password. And now we are successfully connected to our database test. But there's nothing in there, so let's create a table before. I already prepared a statement for creating a table. All it does is it creates a table users with an ID, which is an auto increment, which means the first user gets the ID 1, the second one, the ID 2, and so on. We have a name column in here, which is just text with 255 chars max, which means you can't store more into this column. The same is valid for the email column. Hit Enter. The table got created successfully. We can verify that by using another command which you can use in Postgres, which is \dt, which is for display tables. Alright, our users table is set up. So let's insert our first row through the command line. This is the statement which I prepared already. It's just a simple insert command which will enter a name and an email with John and john@doe.com. Make sure you use single quotes in here, and also don't forget the semicolons at the end of each statement. Otherwise, Postgres won't execute the command. Hit enter, and it got inserted successfully. Let's verify that again by using the select query. It's select star. We want everything from the users table, semicolon, and enter. All right, looks good. We have inserted our first entry into the database. This is basically using PSQL through the command line. But we also have pgadmin, which we got for free by installing Postgres SQL on Windows. So let's try pgadmin. We search for pgadmin, and there it is, pgadmin 4. Open it, and depending on your hardware, it might take a while. Alright, now it asks for a password. In my case, it is test, because this is the password which I have chosen throughout the installation process. Hit enter, and now we are connected. Open up the servers. We have Postgres SQL version 14 running, and here is our test database which we have created through the command line. Open that up as well. Under schemas, tables, we will see our users table. But if you double click on it, nothing will happen. You can now inspect it further by expanding the tree, and you will see we also see our columns in here. But where do we actually see what's in there already? To do so, just right click on users and choose View Edit Data and All Rows. This will open up the query tool, and we will also see what's already in our database. So now, how can we insert another entry in here? Turns out, just double clicking into this field and typing in, let's go with Jane, and the email is jane@doe.com. Okay, so how do we save it now? Because the save button is grayed out. In pgadmin, the save button does something else than saving something to the database. It might save the entire entries in here into a file, which is usually not what we want. We want to save it to the database. And to do so, this icon comes to the rescue. This is the icon to save the data which we edited here to our database. So let's click on that one. Saving data. Data saved successfully. All right, we have saved successfully our data. You can also just insert different other queries here as well. Just right click on users and open the query tool. Now you will end up with a clean slate. So now we could, for now, just enter the select command again. Select star from users, semicolon. And now we hit the play button. And we got our results again. So this is all what you need right now for using pgadmin. If you want to troubleshoot anything, Google is your best friend. We don't need more throughout the course. Just creating entries and creating databases is totally enough. You can not only create entries, you could also create an entire table. To do so, just right click on table, go to create, and then table. Then you can use the wizard to create the table. Make sure you choose the right owner, which is Postgres in our case, because we didn't set up another one. And then you can choose a name for it. Let's go with email or log in, which is also something which we'll need for the SmartBrain project. You can select table space, but you don't have to, and you can add a comment. On the columns section, you can insert columns just by clicking on the plus icon. Choosing a name. Let's go with ID as well, because usually each table has its own ID. And there we have also the serial in here. And it is our primary key. And this is the way you could create another column and as much columns as you want to. All right, we won't discard these changes because we don't need them right now. And this is it. This is using PSQL through the command line and also with pgadmin4. Now you set up to tackle the SmartBrain project with everything installed on Windows. Well done coming this far. Bye bye.